For more than a decade, those on the left side of the political spectrum have slung around libelous and slanderous monikers in order to discredit their political opponents. In particular, of course, to discredit their male political opponents, and more particularly still, to discredit their straight, white, Christian male political opponents. Many such insults, as we come to become familiar with them, ended with the suffix phobe, homophobe, Islamophobe, xenophobe. Others included on the list are bigot, racist, misogynist. Such as were subject to this campaign are told that there is something in their ontology that makes them intractably and irreversibly these things. Whiteness, the new original sin. And so the crown jewel, of course, is Hitler, Nazi. And when this phenomenon first began to sling mud, many on the right were quick to reject and condemn any association with such descriptors. And yet, in a nearly servile way, the accused would produce counterproof that they were none of these things that they were being characterized as. I have a fill-in-the-blank friend. Became a meme all its own. Temporarily, the right had forgotten their spines. They had forgotten their wit. And what's more, they had forgotten the presumption of innocence. Trying to thwart accusations with producing proof to the contrary ended up giving up the game and made many otherwise decent people look pathetic. Such as made these accusations should have been dealt with as I think many of us deal with them now, namely with an exaggerated eye roll, or otherwise a boisterous laugh, and a return to our ordinary normal lives in all faithfulness and confidence that whatever malicious men think of us, or say about us, or do to us, our commendation and the truth finally comes from God, not from man. Sticks and stones and the whole bit. In some way, the servility and pandering posture of some on the right to this unfounded and obviously false slander emboldened many on the left, no different than fear of a barking dog ensures it will also wrap its teeth around your calf. But such as it is, that is how many on the right reacted, until they got hardened enough finally to respond as they should have from the outset. That is, not reacting really, but dismissing and scorning and shaming those who would undermine a cornerstone of our political life together, namely the presumption of innocence, presumption that one also ought to insist upon in the court of public opinion. But some others on the right, scornful of the servile sort, and even more resentful of those on the left, were successfully captured by an element of the left's Psyop, namely those from the same above-mentioned demographic group who said, well, if you're going to call me these things, I am these things. Initially, this was done simply to annoy the left, and those who said such got a good laugh at the left's expense. And many of the rest of us laughed with them. It was a version of what I have described above, a hardening of one's countenance against the accusation of an enemy, a posture to show them that you're not only going to refuse servility, but you will even wear their slanderous monikers as badges of honor, thus disempowering them. These insults from the left were things to be collected like a Boy Scout collects his merits. Here, there wasn't a loss of spine or wit, but in time, a loss of wisdom and proportion. However, many of those who collected their demerit badges from the left began to be bewitched by their resentment, such that many started to sound like the left, not ironically or cynically or satirically, but actually. The "if you are going to call me these things, I am these things," precipitously became "I am these things." And these things are all just negative images of precisely what characterizes the left's fundamental ideology. Many on the right took up the weapons of the left, that is, ascribing collective guilt to entire groups of people, characterizing particular demographic groups as uniquely and intractably evil, scapegoating to avoid responsibility, taking the posture of a victim, promoting political ideologies that deserve to die. A movement on the right that was memeing the left into irrelevance suddenly became the memes of the left, and have in a certain sense vindicated those who have been screeching and howling at the moon about the edgy Moors on the right. In some way, the left has successfully Mr. Smithed many on the right. The left successfully shoved their hand into the chest, into the heart of many on the right, and manipulated sense so that what the right had previously and nearly unanimously opposed, namely the racialism of the left in preference for meritocracy and the dignity of the individual, was suddenly a cringe view of boomers. And I'm sitting there as a late-age millennial thinking, what the heck has just happened? Even though initially this reactive right sat along the edges. But the Psyop gets even more sinister because, of course, the left made a market out of belching forth these slanderous and libelous accusations. They at one and the same time lost their force and believability, even as they did at the same time help give birth to a rising trend on the right that for most of my life, I thought the right was opposed to. That is a kind of white nationalistic racialism, and more recently still filtering into the mainstream, a revisionism and a re-adjudicating of World War II, such that Adolf Hitler is the hero, Christian prince doing yeoman's work, and the Allied forces of the West are seen to be the real villains of the war. And because in the past, the descriptors of racist, white nationalist, or Nazi were as believable an accusation as leprechaun, unicorn, and fairy are at picking out creatures in the real world, not only are many on the right in complete denial that such is actually gaining a foothold in our ranks, but moreover still, I think many do see this occurring, yet lack the moral courage to call attention to it and repudiate such unequivocally. To do so is interpreted by many as alignment with the left, to become an enemy of one's own side, to become, in this case, a race traitor. Does any of that sound familiar? Now, as one on the right, though admittedly not very political, I am told I cannot punch right, or that I ought not to punch right. The thought goes, we have enough problems on the left to deal with. We shouldn't spend time running after specters on our own side. But the thing is, these are not specters. And frankly, if a guy standing beside me in the phalanx is promulgating views that jeopardize the structural integrity of the military formation, it might be my head that gets whacked for what is weak and errant in him. What's more, if such a one claims the name Christ, yet is trying to join to Christ's body a view that does not comport with divine revelation and the Lord who bought me, then there is more at stake than the loss of some political advantage. Here, the whole time, I was under the impression that judgment was to begin with the household of God. I had thought that it was God's business to judge those outside, and that in fact we were to judge those inside the church. The rejoinder, of course, is likely to be, yes, but there are those in the church promoting ideas of the left, liberalizing Christendom. To which, of course, I say, no doubt that's true. But what is the answer here? Why do errors that defect from Christ into the right ditch receive clemency? Why is the punch pulled? I'm in favor of whatever is and is of Christ, and in disfavor of whatever is not and is not of Christ. The royal road of moderation prefers Christ, who is the way, and there are many avenues that divert from this way. Finally, I find the statement, you can't punch right, or I don't punch right, or I'll never punch right, to be completely feckless and weak, as spineless and witless as the initial reactions of many on the right to the attempted moral assassinations of those on the left. You must ask yourself, what does it take to belly up to an enemy? It does take courage, to be sure, but not as much as bellying up to a friend. Not as much as turning to your own side and woeing the horses, so to say. Moral courage is guarding against and correcting errors in thinking that you are more likely to fall prey to yourself. And truth be told, because of course what I'm saying here is likely to be misconstrued and twisted in some way or other, I would actually consider those who have fallen prey to the psyop of the left, who now in earnest think of themselves as unashamedly white nationalists and racists or whatever, to be my friends, in a manner of speaking. My friends who have erred and gone astray, friends drunk on resentment and self-centered self-pity, friends who have been unwittingly captured by an unwitting yet successful psyop, friends in whose head the Jews and Hitler and racialism and IQ statistics live as rent-free as they do in the minds of many, if not most, on the left. Such, again, in my estimation, have been Mr. Smithed by the left, and many of the rest of us are either willfully blind, naive, or too cowardly to note that such has occurred and is continuing apace largely unchecked and unchallenged. I'm not sure I'm equipped to check and challenge it as it ought to be, but I do know the ascendant worldview of the far right has deleterious effects on the lives of those it possesses, temporal and spiritual. As such, it must be rejected and condemned, even as, according to God's gracious will, an attempt is made to retrieve those so captured with surgical exactitude, to separate the error from the one in whose heart it has taken root, to rescue the man, our brothers, our sons, our friends, our parishioners, our fellow clergymen, unto the sanity and the sanctity of the mind of Christ. It seems to me this is in part an error of vision, and that of too low an aim. Many have ceased setting their minds on things that are above, where Christ is seated in the heavens, and have been completely captured by things that are below. Where there is no vision, the people perish, but he that keepeth the law, happy is he. Such as have marred vision make their enemies those of flesh and blood, and spurn what is owed by the Christian to the world of being, to the world and every creature in the world that has value, merely by virtue of its existence rather than its non-existence. To love an enemy, one you consider to be an enemy, is indeed heavenly and divine doctrine, one that takes real courage, real strength, self-control, restraint, precision, and proportion. And it is embodied in the Lord Jesus himself, who, though he looked upon a world of enemies, gave his life into death for them. In your presumption and your hatred, would you do less than Christ? He has removed the dividing wall of hostility such that all men, whatever they are in themselves, would be one in him. There are many trying to reconstruct this dividing wall of hostility, a kind of parasitic partition, and we mustn't let them do it. Our vision must be fixed on one thing, one person, under whom all things according to his own way are ordered. Christ does not will this reactionary worldview now, nor will he in that eschatological future kingdom and reward. We on the royal road must clear the dirt thrown by the left out of our eyes and take as our responsibility the correction of an excess that is no longer merely edgelord memes, but attempts to corrupt our common life together in the world and the faith once for all delivered to the saints in the church. And so God help us to do it.